Welcome to HurricaneCenterLive.com. I'm Alex Garcia, Director of the National Tropical Weather Conference and Executive Producer of these programs. These programs are made possible by USAA, the South Padre Island Convention and Tourist Bureau, and Plylocks Hurricane Clips. These programs are also a team effort with Bill Reed, the former Director of the National Hurricane Center, and Tim Smith, Chief Meteorologist of KRGV-TV. And now, here's Tim Smith.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to NTWC Live for Wednesday, June the 16th. Good to have you along this morning as we have an important program coming your way, and I think this program, once I get the music in the background, is going to be... There we go. We got too many sources going here, just like Alex does. I think we got an important program for you today, and it's something that... Is that on your end, Alex, or is that on my end? There we go. You still hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. This is what happens when you're watching the show in three places while you're doing it, so you can monitor for questions and stuff. Anyway, an important show for you today. I think this is going to be something we've kind of been looking forward to, but not really looking forward to, because it's a subject that I don't know. Well, you'll see when we get there. Anyway, we're talking about mental health in this industry, and it's something that affects all of us, and some in different ways. We want to thank our sponsors who make this program a possibility. Plylocks Hurricane Clips, they're a big part of what we do, and we appreciate them. The South Padre Island Convention and Visitors Bureau, the home of the National Tropical Weather Conference. We hope to be back there live in April once again. And the USAA, sponsoring our programs and a lot of the things we do at the Storm Science Network for a long, long time. We appreciate all that they do. Before we get to the program, we want to get an update on what's happening in the tropics today. And for that, we turn to the guy who is so glad this spring is almost over, so it can finally warm up a little bit. Bill Reed. Good morning, Bill.
Yeah, Tim, thanks a lot. Folks, I'm coming to you from our second home up here just north of Santa Fe, New Mexico, and thought we would escape the Houston heat for a couple of weeks. Well, 2 days ago, we set an all-time record high in Santa Fe of 102 degrees. The relative humidity was less than 1% at that time. It is definitely a dry heat. And no, folks, I didn't come up here to evacuate from whatever's going on in the Gulf, but let's take a look at some of the weather issues we've got there. This is the latest outlook from the National Hurricane Center. Things are definitely looking for development. We're expecting some type of a low to form as the system moves farther away from land. It's stuck there. There is no well-defined low yet, but there's down here right along the coast of the southern part of the Bay of Campeche, if there is one. It's supposed to start moving north, and the models have been fairly consistent for such a disorganized system and pulling this system north, and then maybe developing it a little bit, but the models don't do much with that. I wouldn't get too concerned about exactly what it develops. We've had other storms like that. Just last year, Cristobal, the models weren't that happy with it, became a fairly decent tropical storm. And back in 1998, Tropical Storm Francis formed out of one of these large Central American gyres and created a lot of surge problems on the Texas coast. So that's what we're looking at in the Atlantic. In the Pacific, this system here is again, forecast for maybe later this week or on the weekend, and then hug the coast. Again, the models aren't showing much, but we will see since nothing is yet formed. Carlos is hanging in there as a depression. It's not going to be an issue. It should dissipate to a remnant low shortly. On the satellite view, again, most of the convection is over land. There's a little bit of deep convection moving from west to east with the upper level flow. So there's a bit of a shear issue and maybe some dry air issue on the western side of what we be moving northward out of the Bay of Campeche later this week. We'll have to watch for that. And here's the system off of the coast of Mexico looking very convectively active this morning, but there's apparently not yet any clearly defined low pressure center with that. Just a quick snapshot of the visible where you can kind of get a hint that there's some broad low-level circulation, but you can also see the clouds over top of that moving steadily from west to east, indicating a fair amount of shear still going on there. Again, as I said earlier, the models don't get too proud of it. I'm just showing you the ECMWF. This is the greens are the pressures that are over 1,000 millibars, and the blue are 980 to 1,000. And it's interesting, while it doesn't think too much of it in the Gulf, the ensemble members of the European form a fairly decent extratropical low after it makes landfall and gets picked up in the westerlies and moves to the East Coast. As far as impacts at this stage of the game, the main impact being looked at is very heavy rainfall and in keeping with where the model solutions are and the fact that most of the weather will be east of where the track of the center goes. There's a large area of 5 inches or greater over the central Gulf Coast, moving well inland in Louisiana, Mississippi, and Atlanta, and the peak values approaching 10 inches. And what the forecasters there usually try to remind us is this is a general forecast. Isolated amounts could easily be double that for a peak event amount in that area there. So that's what we're looking at in regards to the tropics this morning. As Tim told you, we're very proud to be sponsored by a number of good organizations. First, USAA, out of personal recommendation. I've been with them 50 years now. And they're aggressively searching out to make more customers out of veterans and all to take advantage of the great programs they have. And ply locks are manufactured just about 10 miles away from where I live, back in the Houston area. It's a great product for ease in hanging your plywood shutters over your windows as we go into the hurricane season. Time to get that stuff ready. Okay, this morning we have a different show. We're going to be talking about some of the psychological issues of working under stress in these hurricane systems, and most of us know about that. So we have two guests here today. One, Bryan Hale, who has been the chief meteorologist for CBS 4 in the Rio Grande Valley for more than 20 years. He's originally from Michigan. He started as an MMJ before his first station offered to help him get his meteorology degree. He is now an AMS certified meteorologist and uses his more than 30 years of experience in broadcast to help both young meteorologists and journalists at KVEO learn the market and the business. Amy Sullivan is the news director for the KVEO duopoly in the Rio Grande Valley. A military veteran from Wisconsin, she took a different path to get in the newsroom, including loading the weapon systems on an A-10 Warthog and owning a bakery before finally following her heart and going into journalism. Having dealt with mental health issues most of her life, is one of the things she is most passionate about. The one common theme I see between the two of them is they both escaped snow country to get down to the valley. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Amy to start our show.
All right, thank you. Yes, definitely escaping snow. But so when we were asked to do this presentation, I talked with Bryan quite a bit over how we were going to handle this. Many of you know that mental health issues have directly affected our newsroom and Bryan's weather team. But this is something that both of us have dealt with personally on the family end and in the newsroom. And it's something that we feel is very necessary. So I'm going to share my screen. So I want to start with major weather events. Obviously, you guys are working for long hours, days on end before hurricane, communicating with everyone in the newsroom, management, other meteorologists, the young journalists, especially in some of these markets. You guys are dealing with kids who are right out of college who've never seen a hurricane, never seen anything severe in any way, shape, or form, and they ask kind of questions. They go into situations where they're not being the safest. But after that, you're dealing with the impact of the storm. You're seeing the images coming in. Some of these images are hard to deal with, but you're seeing them repeatedly. Obviously, during a storm, the adrenaline's kicking in. You're doing this for hours, sometimes days on end, and you don't really think about it in that aspect. Bryan, you can kind of chime in here too. This isn't my forte, but I know I've seen my meteorologist team work for days right now, constantly preparing people, preparing the community. And as many of you know, the community relies on you to keep them safe. So having that pressure on you all of the time can be exhausting, can be mentally draining. And it's not something that you really can prepare yourself for. After the storms are over, many of you go out in the field, you're surveying the damage, you're talking to the victims, you're talking to people in the community who have seen this and felt this, and you hear those stories. Those stories live with you. And sometimes if you're not mentally prepared for those things and for hearing those, it can be wearing on you, Brian.
Well, that's, getting your own house in order first is the most important thing to do, is to have your family and your home ready to go before you get to the shop. That way, you've just taken a big burden off what you're facing. But yes, there are two facets to this. I know you'll hit the second one here in a minute, but that immediate work-related, the pressure that you're feeling, how long is this going to last? Are we going to have electricity? Is that old generator out back going to hold up? All the things you're worried about. And am I going to say the right thing? Is my forecast in line? When Bill just gave his forecast, I had a big moment, knowing that, hey, my forecast is right on. Thanks, Bill. I look to people like you and Tim and Alex to lead the way on stuff like that. You don't have to invent the wheel. Don't come into your shop and think, I've got to put this all together myself. I have only my ideas are the right ideas. No, you've got to look at others, check out what they're saying on social media, and let that be your guide as well, so that you don't have the full burden of the forecast, the full burden of informing people, and the full burden of keeping your house in order all at once.
So, yeah, all of those things combined, when you're not used to that pressure, it can really wear you out. So understanding that you have other people, if you have other meteorologists who are more seasoned, you can lean on, you can talk to, and get their feedback on how you can deal with those things. That might be the first measure in the immediate. The next thing that we go to is some of the things that you might be experiencing just in your everyday. If any of these things on the screen apply to you and are out of the ordinary, you're suddenly critical of everything. You have trouble getting out of bed in the morning. You're not able to focus. You're doing things like drinking more than usual, taking drugs, eating more than usual, even changing in how you sleep, unexplained physical issues. These are really, really signs of mental health issues, signs of burnout, signs of depression, signs of anxiety that you need to watch out for, not just in yourself, but in your coworkers. I know that a big thing for managers is I'll deal with it when I see it. Or it's just, they're tired. When you get to that point, when you get to a point where you're burnt out, it's too much. So these are all burnout, depression, anxiety, PTSD symptoms that you need to figure out and prepare for. Ask for some help, get with someone who can help you with them, because all of those things, they lead to more than just the physical. It's other things that you might deal with: fatigue, self-isolating. You dread going into work. And to be a meteorologist, obviously you have to be passionate about weather. You have to be passionate about what you do. But if for some reason you get to that point where you're like, I just don't want to deal with this, I don't want to deal with the storm, I don't want to deal with this, then obviously you need to look at that. See your doctor, because other results of this: high blood pressure, heart disease, stroke. Your mental health and your physical health, they go together. So you have to take care of those things before it gets to that point. And again, I said, you can't always wait to see a sign to deal with something. And there's a reason for that. This is Alex Herbst. I use these pictures because this is how we saw him every day. And he worked directly with Bryan, so I'll let him talk about Alex.
Well, Alex was one of the most, I referred to him in my eulogy to him as a good egg. Just a fantastic human being, wouldn't harm a hair on your head, was always there to listen to what you had to say. But he was so in a bubble. He was out of his element. He belonged back in academia. He belonged back at Mississippi State or another university. He got out of his depth going into broadcasting. And he did so, but he did so in a very good way in that he took to broadcasting. He was not a broadcaster when we hired him. It was a very interesting interview to hire him. To sit down with him, having had no broadcast experience, we took a gamble on him, and it paid off. He took like that because he knew all the meteorology. That was easy. I used to ask him questions all the time about the latest things and what can I do to improve my meteorology. But I would also notice that he wasn't going out with other folks. He wasn't attending, little things we would do together, and just out of the blue. A total bolt from the blue. You could have asked me 10 years ago, what if Alex Herbst was going to commit suicide? I'd have told you, or how many years ago this was, I would have told you were nuts, because just no way. This guy was as solid as a rock and smart as a whip and just happy as a clam. I can use all the metaphors there are. He just was it. And then to commit suicide like that, just was the most dumbfounding thing I've ever encountered in my life. That there are people. I grew up with my mother was mentally ill, seriously mentally ill, and for many years, I had to deal with that. And the more you tried to help, the worse it got. But with Alex, it was invisible. It was utterly invisible. So what Amy had referenced, a manager dealing with it when they see it, it's too late. The horse is out of the barn by the time you see it. And there's no way to get the horse back in the barn without professional help. And that was the problem with Alex. His issue was utterly invisible. Now his father had committed suicide as well. But you can't just look someone in the face and say, well, your father committed suicide, therefore you're going to. You can't do that to somebody. That's unfair. It also could cause more harm than good. But what you can do is say, oh, but I did. I said, if you ever need to talk about that, come talk to me. He never took me up on it. Just because I relayed to him my mother's mental illness, and said, hey, if your father's suicide is ever coming up to the fore in your mind, just let me know. And he never did. He kept everything to himself, and his death was the end result. Amy?
And as Alex news director, like Bryan, this was a shock. This is still 2 years later, definitely impacted our newsroom. Some people who were extremely close to him, in addition to Bryan, still work here. We still talk about Alex. It is a very touchy subject in our newsroom, but it was a shock because he didn't say anything. People who say that he was the closest person to them in their life They didn't know anything. There was no signs. There was nothing outwardly. So when it comes to these things, you have to speak up for yourself. As a manager, Brian and I have talked to not just the weather team, but the entire newsroom. If you feel something, something is out of the ordinary, you have to be your own advocate. You have to say something. I have said this to my newsroom. I'm sorry if there's any news directors in here. If you're unhappy, I will let you out of your contract so you can go home and get help you need, because I never want to live that again, ever. My staff they're like my family. They're like my children. I honestly can say I don't know that our newsroom would have gotten through that if we didn't have a general manager who was quick to get us counseling, and good leaders who understood how to deal with this, like Brian. It was very, very difficult. So if you are in a place like a chief meteorologist where you can help lead not just your meteorologists, but the young journalists, when they get to that point, do it. Talk to them, help them, reach out to them, because they don't know how to do these things, like balance work and their personal. They burn themselves out. It's okay to turn your phone off. I'm telling you this as a manager. It is okay to turn your phone off for a little bit. Just let someone know, hey, I need an hour. I'm turning my phone off. It's okay. You have to do it. Self-care. This is one of those weird hippy-dippy things that we want to everyone needs to treat yourself. Okay, yes, it's different for you than what it is for someone else. Yoga, massage, vacations, going out with a friend, having a beer, not a case of beer.
Mm-hmm.
Brian.
Yeah, Tim.
Doing something that you wouldn't normally do to make yourself just have a good time, unplug for a little bit. Those things you need to do. Exercise is, and I say this as a person who hates to exercise, it is good for you. It is good for your mental health. Sleeping, again, a person who doesn't sleep, you can ask my staff, sleep is good for you. You need to do it. You need to recharge. Naps are great as adults. I can verify this. And you have to talk to someone. But you also need to be mindful of who you talk to. Everyone has a toxic person in your place of business. That person will suck you in. They will feed off of whatever you're feeling, and they will help you twist it. They're not there to help you. So you need to be mindful of who you are talking to, Brian.
Well, that's very true. Yeah, I had to stand up in the middle of a corporate meeting and shut that person down who was being toxic in the lee of all this. I mean, we were in the aftermath of Alex's death, and this person was, whipping up a lather to their own end, and I had to stand up and put a stop to it. Not that management wouldn't, but that I felt that because I was not officially a manager, I had a little more leeway to stand up and say, hey, you need to sit down and, calm yourself. That toxic person just can make it so much worse. And that person, if there are news directors listening, that person needs to be gone. That's all there is to it. I'm not an advocate for that type of action, but someone like that who in the wake of a suicide is using that to their own benefit, that person needs to be out of your newsroom. But one thing I did do after Alex was gone was invite a lot of the young people over to my house for a little powwow. Tim even managed to find his giant Jenga set, his friend with a giant Jenga set, and I borrowed that from him so we could have, a commonality. And we had a ball at my house just talking and working things through. But that leads me to what I think is another issue here, and that is, especially in a lot of smaller market newsrooms, and what I'm suffering from is the age disparity. I'm scared to talk to the young ones, and I think they're scared to talk to me. And I think, I've got a lot to contribute, but I'm a grumpy old man. If I see video that I don't like on our air, I'm going to say, I didn't like that. That was not good video. But the younger folks need to know that there's something to be gained from talking to those of us who have been around the block and maybe have personal experiences or work experiences that we can help them with. Don't dismiss us because we weren't, born in the cell phone era. We have things to contribute. Amy.
Bryan does very well with contributing to making sure that we're all sane and keeping me in check. But if you're looking for people to talk to, obviously your family, if they are people you can go to and support you, friends. Most companies that you work for now have AEP or EAP, sorry, not AEP, or some emergency line that you can call if you need help. And then also the National Suicide Hotline is always there if people need it. But reach out to somebody. Reach out to someone who is there to help. And if you don't feel comfortable going to your news managers or your news director or your chief meteorologist, then maybe you need to reevaluate where you're working, because you should be able to go to them and tell them, hey, I need help. But if they're not someone you can go to and say, I need this, then that is something you need to look at.
Yeah, and your boss could be the toxic person. We can't just say, okay, all bosses are perfect. Your boss could be the toxic person who you need to do an end run around. Even if your company doesn't support that action, too bad, so sad. You need to take action for you. And if you have to skirt around and go to the GM or a regional representative with your company, then do it.
So now we're done. So if anyone has any questions or comments, concerns, dissertations.
What a terrific and passionate presentation. We really appreciate you guys and kind of opening up about what you've gone through. And we know that it was difficult. We're 20 miles down the street. And it was difficult for us as well. And we barely knew Alex. But you're just always terrified of something like that happening. And it's interesting that there was just no signs beforehand. I think that's what's interesting. We asked, what do we look for? But there was nothing to look for. And I think that's fascinating. We've got some questions coming in. We do want to, again, mention our folks that make these programs possible. South Powder Convention and Visitors Bureau, the home of the National Tropical Weather Conference. We're there every year. We were there this year. It was just us there virtually. We hope to have everybody back in person in 2022. And Black Magic Design, pushing a lot of the buttons to make this show work. And you can do that very easily. Check out Black Magic Design on their website. Okay, one of the questions that has come in online, and it's just, very specifically, how did the storm fatigue from last year? Because we had such an active tropical season, Bryan, in particular. The tropical season was so busy. How did you deal with storm fatigue? And how did the storm fatigue play into the mental health of the weather team?
Well, the way I did it was, our team has grown in size. At Hurricane Dolly, I was the only Met in the building. I had a chair I could sleep in I brought from home and would catch 10-minute naps in between coverage. But this time I had more people, and I was able to lean on them and just say, hey, you know what? Take it. Run with it. I've got younger, hungry Mets in my department who, I'll say it out loud. They're looking to put that reel together. And I'm like, yeah, take the coverage and run with it for a while I get some rest. And there's no shame in that. As well, planning. I think an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. That if you plan properly, and as I said, have your own house in order first, that will help you so much in terms of fatigue during the storm. But that exists. You know, you're worried about your house, you're worried about your town, and you're the one who's out there covering it. And that's true for reporters as well. And you're also concerned about your own safety. Will my building hold up that I'm in with a strong hurricane? All these things are running through your mind. But if you can focus, if you can divvy up the duties amongst your people, and you can have your own house in order and just focus on that one thing, things get much easier.
Go ahead, Bill, jump in. You're muted, Bill. There you
Yeah,
go.
I'm back on you there. Yeah, keeping on that same theme, I was a manager for 20 years, so a lot of what you guys are talking about I resonated with. I never had an issue anywhere close to what you guys are facing. And what struck me right immediately when you talked about Alex's demise was how it came like a bolt out of the blue. There was nothing to recognize there. That I don't know how you can deal with that as far as planning for it in advance, because there's no clues. But I think a lot of times, not as severe as a suicide, but other issues come up. There are recognizable signs, and I know I had absolutely no training in how to prepare for it, to recognize, how to let the staff know that you had an openness towards discussing and dealing with those at no negative impact to the employee, so that you have an open channel of communication. Do you have any comments on that part of the issue for managers?
I know that this has become more of an issue in newsrooms across the country. So like RTDNA has a lot of resources now they're trying to get put together. But I think as a whole, a lot of us work for big corporations. The corporations need to kind of offer those trainings for news managers. There really is no way to prepare for something like this. And from my personal experience, I had dealt with death in my previous newsroom before coming to the Valley. Since I've been in the Valley, we've had Alex, and then we had an anchor die from cancer. There's no way to prepare for death in your newsroom. There isn't. And I wouldn't wish this on my worst enemy. It's not anything that is easy to deal with, but I think that because it is unfortunately becoming more common, there has to be more resources coming forward. But I do know that there are organizations like RT and DNA that are working to try and find a way to provide that. So when you have those conferences and those conventions like this, that they're offering stuff for people.
Good. I kind of directing this towards Brian. I was fortunate to work in about 6 separate operational offices between National Weather Service and Navy. And the one commonality I saw among operational meteorologists for the most part is they do fine and excel during the run-up and response to a severe weather or hurricane threat. That's why they got into the business. It's the aftermath when the adrenaline rush stops that you have to watch out for being really exhausted and run down. How's that resonate with you guys?
Oh, absolutely. Dolly was the best example of that. When Dolly stalled over us for 4.5 hours. So, and I'm the only Met in the building, so it's just absolutely numbing. Then afterwards, to go home in the dark, then that's advanced darkness because there's no electricity. And then you get home and you're trying to make sense of where things are. I had sent my family out of town. My wife's in education, so I'd sent her to her parents out of town. So I was able to just come home. But now I've got to clean up. Now I've got, the refrigerator's a mess, and all these other things have to be taken care of. So now I'm bone tired, and I haven't slept for 2 days, and I have to rely on the people I know. I have to rely on my church family, my family at the station, and just talk and communicate that and get some sleep. Sleep is the big one. Amy hinted on that a bit ago. As soon as you can, get some sleep, because sleep will make you ornery, and lack of sleep will make you make poor decisions as well. And that's first and foremost. But yeah, Bill, you're absolutely right. We love to just crash, kick the door in and get the coverage going. But afterwards, we look at each other like, well, goodbye. And that's the wrong thing to do. I might also add that managers might want to look at, if it's not on the resume of a new hire, ask, what do you do for fun? What do you do what's your involvement in your community? What do you like? And if that person can't answer any of those questions to your satisfaction, you might consider somebody else or you might consider, if you hire that person, you're going to need to help them along and make sure they are able to assimilate to your environment.
Very cool. One of the things that's one of the officers of that, one of the things we did after there'd be some real bad severe weather, like a tornado, a program we had brought up, we would actually put out a statement saying, a lot of people end up being extremely, especially children, extremely scared of thunderstorms after an event like this. And if it was really bad, we'd invite them into the office and show them how we produce the warnings and get information out so they're not totally helpless. And I think the forecaster benefited more from that than the person that came in. It gave them a boost after the event.
Absolutely. And, our company at the time, not the same company, the previous company, owned WLOX. And after Katrina. And to hear their stories was just that was mind numbing. I mean, I got tired for them because their homes were gone. Their property was destroyed. Their station was destroyed. Just that aftermath, it goes on and on and on. Tornado aftermath, many times, it's so localized that people don't appreciate it for how devastating it is. But the flooding and hurricane style coverage, the aftermath goes on for weeks and even months.
Yeah, I remember that most recently from Harvey. It seemed like forever before most of the people that were impacted started their lives back to normal. And that did wear on the forecasters, you could tell.
It did. And I'll tell you something else, and that is that getting people to talk to one another, as I said earlier, with in some stations, the age difference can be fairly dramatic. And we're seeing, we're in a country now where people are staking out their differences. They're like, I'm this, and by gum, that's that, and I'm not you, and I'm not you. I think that's a horrible way to run your life. And I think that you have to kind of cross that bridge, go to that other person who has staked out their claim and say, you know what, I like working with you. I think you did a great job on that story. Or, hey, I see you're just sitting there all alone. Want to have a cup of coffee? Something. Reach out to those people, despite their insistence that they're different and they wish to be alone.
Interesting. We did some friends of mine and I did some surveys informally within the Weather Service and about the personality traits of people that get into operational weather, and we were not really all that surprised at the outcome, except for the magnitude. About the results showed about 85% of us were introverts and only 15% extroverts.
And we're just the opposite in television.
I would think it'd be very difficult to be a on-camera meteorologist as an introvert, because you really have to be out in the community and talking to people that you don't know, which seems to be an issue with that difference.
And as Amy pointed out, that's what you have to recognize before you get into this. You've got to know your own situation. am I an introvert, an extrovert? Is this the right fit for me? Because sometimes experimentation can lead to, a person who just leaves work and hibernates in their apartment the rest of the time, and that doesn't lead to any good.
Yeah, yeah. The after 9/11, the FEMA folks produced some training modules that dealt with stress from a major event like that. And one of the things that caught my eye was that all of us have a breaking point under stress, and very few of us actually know what that is until we've reached it. And that's got to be a real challenge in your workplace, trying to be aware of that so that you can notice someone approaching that on your staff.
Yeah, and I remember having my own temper tantrum after 9/11, because I was just so fed up. And I threw my jacket on the floor and said, blah, blah, blah. And, and unfortunately, the microphone was still in my jacket and I broke it. But I went to management and offered to pay for it. But it was my moment of release and, doggone it, I'm tired of this. And, dealing with that, the aftermath of anything, whether it's severe weather or you're just dealing with that day-to-day situation. That you have to deal with it. You can't put it to the back burner, period. If you think you're impervious, if you think you're above it all, you're not. You're going to end up in a bad place.
Yeah. Tim, I bet you got some thoughts because you're in the same.
I do. I'm raising my hand over here. I've got a lot of thoughts to go with this. Yeah, this is fascinating stuff. Bryan, you talked about Dolly versus Hannah last year, and Dolly was limited staffing. We were in the same boat just down the street. And when Hannah came along, we're both fully staffed, all kinds of people everywhere. We had 8 people on staff during Hannah. But as the chief, you feel like you need to be there the whole time. And for me, at least, they had to literally come and physically carry me away and say, look, you can take a nap. You must take a nap. And you feel like you have to, and you don't.
Yes, it's a thing of am I the leader? But you can lead by example, and your example of taking that time out is the best way to lead sometimes. Again, be there to kick the door in, but then make sure that you tell everybody, okay, Jim, you're doing this, Andrew, you're doing this, all these different folks, you have your positions, you have your times, you have your schedules, and let's stick to it. Because if we do that, then nobody's going to, let's face it, Tim, the young Mets, they're hungry. They want to get that tape together. They're going to hang out there until they drop dead, until they drop over from being tired. So it's a matter of making sure that they don't overdo it.
Right, exactly. And, and kind of in a similar vein, but outside of storms, talk about, and Amy, you can jump in on this too, because it's doesn't just affect weather people, but what about the internet trolls? When we started in the business, Bryan, we've been doing this a long time. We didn't have the internet trolls. The internet didn't exist. And now you post something on Facebook and you'll have a few people that say, oh, thanks for that. But then you've got the other people that just go after you for everything you post. And for the young people that don't understand what an internet troll is, I think they know what it is, but how do they deal with that? How do you tell them, you're not as bad as those people say you are?
I usually tell them to ignore the comments unless they're pertaining to or asking a legitimate question. I know the probably the most questions I get about the trolls are the ones who comment about women and what they're wearing or whatever. I usually just tell them, go look at that person's Facebook page and you'll feel better. But it's true. My general rule of thumb is don't read the comments. Because people are empowered by a keyboard. They're not going to say those things to your face. And they don't have to anymore. They can say whatever they want. The biggest introvert has a microphone. So those things that they wouldn't normally say walking down the street, they can say now, without fear of getting punched in the face, because when in my day, if someone would have said something like that to me, that would have been my reaction. But that's not the case anymore. So ignore the comments unless they're like asking a legitimate question. You just have to take it with a grain of salt. I know it sucks, and you have to get really, really thick skin, but unfortunately, when you're in on the magical box, you're untouchable. They don't understand that you really are a person. You're not a figment of their imagination.
I've been floored by how many negative comments I've seen about females and their clothing. I mean, did your parents not raise you any better than that? I mean, that's what I would say to a troll. But still, just what gives you that empowerment other than the keyboard and the anonymity to just take a swipe at someone like that? I just don't understand why you would do that, but that's me. Yeah. The worst thing that happens to me when I'm in the grocery store, someone says, "I love Tim Smith." And I said, "So do I."
If that's the worst thing that happens, we're all happy, right?
Yeah.
It's all good. And it goes, there's so many things. I'll just go to the next question because someone asked online. Going back to what you were talking about, the toxic individuals in the newsroom, toxic individuals wherever it may be in the company, wherever it may be. Casper's asking to provide some further advice on how to recognize those toxic individuals.
Amy?
Let them open their mouth. Usually they're not hard to weed out, unfortunately. They're the person who doesn't have anything nice to say. They're trying to control everything. They always look for the negative in everything. Not everything is negative. Everything is really what you make it. So if they really have nothing nice to say about anyone or anything, they're usually the person you need to stay away from, because they're trying to bring everyone to their level. So you might be having a really rough day, and they're going to feed off that, and they're going to say, "Yeah, that's wrong. Yeah, that person is horrible," and they're going to continue to perpetuate that. And so when you might be having a good day, they're going to find a way to bring you back down, because that's how they operate. They feed off negativity, and they're really going to look for that. But if they never have anything good to say, they're probably the person you need to avoid.
Yeah, that tripwire moment. Tripwire moment is important for those people as well. When something bad happens and they try to make hay out of it, that's it. That's your number one red flag right there.
Good. I think that answered Casper's question. Appreciate that. All right, Bill, do you have any more questions over there on your end?
No, this has been a very serious discussion. I think you've hit on some bad things that can happen. I'm really sorry you had to experience suicide on your station like that. That sounds like a nightmare to go through.
Well, if it does happen, if something like that happens, don't be afraid to go through the normal steps. And one of those is anger. I'm mad as hell at Alex because he, pardon my French, pissed away a perfectly good life and a great education and contribution to society and to friends and to family. And it just I just became very upset about that because, dang it, I can't go back. I can't go to him and say, I'd like to box you upside the head for doing that. I can't. He's gone. And I have to live with that. And that's not fun. But it's what we do. We have to. I have to be strong for my children. I have to be strong for my wife, and they have to be strong for me. And it's don't be afraid to exercise your emotions when and if something like that happens. Bill?
Yeah. Very good. Well, excellent information. Tim, back to you.
All right. Great program today. We really appreciate it, Amy and Bryan. Great stuff. And thanks for sharing your passion and your feelings about this, because I cannot imagine how difficult it was to go through. I just can't imagine. It's just one of those situations we hope that we never have to, and you did. So our hearts go out to you guys, and thanks for sharing it with us today. We really appreciate it. Good job, y'all.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
That wraps up this program for today. This has been an important program. We talked a little bit about tropical weather at the beginning, and we'll do that again every week when we do this. When I say every week, we're going to take a break next week. We'll have a replay of one of our other programs next week. So you'll be able to tune in at 10 o'clock on Wednesday and see one of the other programs that we've done. And we'll be back the week after that. We want to thank all of our sponsors who make these events a possibility. They understand the importance of not just tropical weather, but what we're doing on days like today. And we're going to have a lot more programs like this in the future. Our sponsors, the South Padre Island Convention and Visitors Bureau. Again, South Padre Island is where we hope to be, back with the Courtyard Marriott Hotel with a whole bunch of brand new beach. They just added about 200 yards of beach in front of the hotel this week. So hopefully it doesn't get washed away in a storm this summer. So the South Padre Island Convention and Visitors Bureau. We want to thank USAA, big part of what we've been doing for a long time. They understand the importance of this, and we appreciate them. Plylocks Hurricane Clips. I have some right here. It's real simple. All you do is attach it to your plywood, slide it into the window, then you pull it back out, and it'll protect your windows in a storm, and they're easy up, easy down. And Black Magic Design, we appreciate them being part of the program as well. Bill, thank you. As always, great insight. Brian and Amy, great job today. We appreciate it. Alex, good job on the front end. We appreciate that as well. We will see you in 2 weeks for another program. In the meantime, take care. Stay safe out there. Bye-bye.